Welcome to the Startup Competitors Podcast, where we talk with early-stage entrepreneurs to understand what information they use to inform product roadmap, strategy, and market differentiation.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we're chatting with Wes Winham, who's one of the founders and the CEO of Woven. Wes, welcome.
Thanks. It's good to be here, Mike.
All right, man. Give us the pitch. Tell us about Woven.
All right. So we help companies hire developers. Hiring developers is really hard. And the worst part of the process right now is the resume screen, like that first step. That's where 80 to 90% of the candidates get screened out. And we improve that step. And we do it by the metaphor I like to use is if you're going to hire dancers, you should probably watch them dance. And we give you an opportunity to see software engineers actually apply their trade. And I say software engineering, not programming, because programming is part of software engineering. But software engineering is more than that. It's a team sport. And it kind of came out of the situation of I was head of engineering at a startup. I did a lot of hiring. I thought I was really good at it. And then I had my first mishire, which is kind of a common story here. People think they're good at it. Trust your gut. And then you have that time that doesn't go well. And it sucks, especially if you hire someone that you like. It's a good person that's trying, but isn't a good fit for the job.
Right.
In my case, that was my fault. So I went out and did a bunch of research, found out that the best companies were hiring differently, and then spent the next 3 years at PolicyStat, which is where I was head of engineering, trying to build a better system. And for me, it was kind of this watch dancers dance is a simple idea, but it took several years and 200 candidates to kind of get it right. And for me, the eureka moment of maybe we have something is I was hiring a mid-level engineer. So that's like 3 to 5 years of experience. Yeah. And I had a brand new University of Michigan grad apply. Normally I would reject that candidate. They have 0 years of experience, which is less than 3. But instead I gave them this scenario I built and he just crushed it. It was amazing. Like code quality and documentation, architecture, all the stuff you look at an engineer. And his resume was bland, nothing special. And he did better than some of my senior engineers. And I was about to reject this person. I was about to in a world where there's not enough developers, software is eating the world. I was about to reject a candidate that was amazing. And that was kind of maybe we should figure out how to make this screening thing better. And that's what we focus on.
Nice. Make that maybe go one level deeper. What does it actually look like or what does it do? So if I'm either the hiring manager or I'm the candidate who's applied, what's my experience when I interact through Woven?
Yeah. So your experience as the candidate is you apply. And one of the first things you'll do as part of your interview is you'll spend an hour doing work that looks like work that you would do on that team at that job. So that might be answering Slack messages to help a junior engineer troubleshoot a problem, might be reviewing an architecture proposal. It'll probably be finishing, a pull request, taking some code that's almost there and getting across the finish line, something where you can really dig your teeth into it. And the problem is close to what you'd be doing on that job. So you're also learning what the expectations are of, everyone wants a full stack engineer, but for some people that means I do 90% front end. Some people it means 90% back end. Sometimes It really is full stack. And we can give you an exercise that helps you as a candidate understand what that job is actually like. And then you wait a little bit and you get feedback from us that's detailed, code review level feedback on the things you did really well and the things you did maybe not so well. So it's better for candidates, limited amount of time, you get a lot of learning. And on the back end as a hiring manager, instead of having to choose who you spend your limited time with based on a resume, you get to see the Woven recommendation, which we've benchmarked and calibrated with your team to get the quantitative element. It's like a 0 to 100 score.
Yeah.
And kind of that's a quantitative element. Qualitative element would be strengths and weaknesses. This candidate's great at documentation, well-structured code. They struggled with asynchronous code and promises. So you get a quick hit of here's the work they can do combined with the resume. So you make a better decision.
That's awesome. Give us a quick picture of where you guys are at on the journey. Any sort of vanity metric you're willing to share to help somebody who's listening understand kind of how you got here.
Sure. I love vanity metrics. I left PolicyStat after we sold it in July of last year. And we've been, my two co-founders, Cal Shipley and Anthony Panazzo, and I have been at it full time for a year now. So November of last year, we have 10 customers. We're at 64K ARR. We're just closing a round of funding right now. The names for these fundraising rounds are ridiculous, but this one I'm calling pre-seed. I don't know if there's going to be pre-seed soon.
This is a safe place. You're fine. Call it whatever your investors want to hear.
Yeah, that's what I call it. That's
whatever is going to get you to write a check, we'll call it that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So we're closing that out, and that feels pretty good.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
And is it still just the three of you?
We have a customer success lead who is awesome, has dedicated time to make sure our customers, like the feedback loops are tight. Like when a customer has an interview with a candidate and it wasn't quite there, we can go back and Kate takes the feedback so we can change the exercises and the scenarios to like tighten that feedback loop.
Yep.
So it keeps getting better and better. So she runs that and makes sure that we're, getting customer referrals and all that stuff that is really important, but it's hard to prioritize as a founder. We think that customer success function is really important, especially in SaaS, where all of your revenue is in the future. Like this year's revenue is nothing compared to the next 10 years.
Right. So 4 of you then, right?
4 of us.
All right. Now I got to jump in. I can't stop. So that customer feedback loop is fascinating to me. So how much of that, or how often is that feedback for you guys around the interview process and screening process versus like, no, everything you said was dead on. It just wasn't the right culture fit. It wasn't, there's tons of reasons why somebody may not be a good fit, right? Salaries may not, expectations may not align, any number of things, right? But like how often is it like these other things that are outside of maybe their technical ability versus like, after you guys screen them, we thought they would be X and it turned out they were Y.
Yeah. I think there's a early in the process answer and then there's later. So early on, it's reasonably often, someone in the first 10 candidates will learn something that makes us want to make a change in the scenario. Either we're going to tweak a knob, like, we had team coding as fairly low because that's what we thought wasn't super important. And then we had an interview and they didn't really know how to talk about source control and how you would work on a team, continuous integration, continuous delivery. And we think that's important. It's like, we heard you that it wasn't important. It actually is. Let's turn this up, or let's substitute in another scenario where you might be taking information from a ticket tracker and making a decision on that information. So that happens early. After a couple months where we've seen dozens of candidates, then the feedback is consistently the phone screen is doing its job. There's like the synchronous, I'm talking to another human. Can we communicate well? That is a really good, phone screen is an amazing tool at that thing because it is that thing.
Right.
It's not so good at the rest of software engineering. So if you find out that in the phone screen, they're not a good one-on-one synchronous verbal communicator, then that is the phone screen doing their job. That's what it's for.
Got it. Awesome. You talked earlier when you were given the pitch for kind of where Woven came from, that you looked at some of the best companies to look at how they do this. I would love for some anecdotes from that experience. What are some of the companies that you looked at and what were some of the things that you saw that you pulled into this process? And then I'd love to hear some of the things that you saw that you would have liked to have pulled in, but you just haven't figured out a way to do it yet.
Yeah. So the big trend was take-home tests, right? So if you look at Fortune 500 companies 10 years and older, almost none of them do a kind of take-home test. And there's kind of reasons I can explain, like structural reasons related to how HR and engineering see the world that kind of make that hard to do at a bigger company. But if you look at younger companies like GitHub, companies that are engineering focused, it's rare that those companies don't have some sort of take-home test component, which is like project-based work. Sometimes it's time box, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's greenfield, sometimes it's start a project. There's variation. But that, like Slack, they had a list of like, what are the 3 things that have been most important for your company? And one of them was always have candidates do real work as part of the interview. It's like, watch dancers dance. It's not rocket science. And there's lots of different ways to do it. But that was really the trend, is you should have people do something close to the work, and that will be pretty predictive at the work.
Watch dancers dance is like, it's fantastic at getting the point across. At what point in the journey did you pick that up and start using it? It's really good. So my previous thing was I used sports analogies for a while, and I was like, I kept apologizing for the sports analogy. Like, watch a quarterback throw, and I was like, there's got to be something. So I think it was like February of March of this year. Like, that's the one. Interesting.
Also, because I like dancing is a collaborative thing, right? So that it's like you have dancers and you're playing off each other, and it's improvisational sometimes, which I think is a good analogy for software engineering. It's not like I go out and execute this thing solo.
Right.
Software engineering is a team sport.
Team sport. Yep. So when you looked at those companies, and especially the smaller companies, you saw things that they were doing that were really interesting to you, but they just didn't fit what you were doing with Woven. Do you have some examples of those?
So as far as the small companies that we're doing,
when they're doing their interview screening and trying to find the best candidates and things like that. So is there anything outside of the take-home test, or let's give them a specific project?
So things people are doing that are working well.
Yeah.
I think the things that people are doing well are actually like this basic blocking and tackling, which like if you do those things, they put you in the top 10% easily. And the basics are, there's this branch of psychology called IO psychology, which is industrial organizational psychology, which is the worst branded academic field I can think of. But they study hiring. That's one of the big things. So there's lots of people that, they send out fake resumes and see what gets callbacks, and they test interview processes. And they've got pretty reliable research on what creates more predictive interview processes. Basics. You should ask the same questions of every candidate, and that allows you to have learning in your process and compare apples to apples. And it's rare that companies do this. So it's get the people in a room before you're hiring, say like, what do we want this person to do? And then how can we ask questions that will elicit their capability to do this? So that's like the first one. Do that and you're way ahead. Then it's what type of questions. So the questions that are more predictive tend to be, they call them behavioral questions. And they're kind of boring, they're kind of cliche, but they work. This is, tell me about a time when X. Tell me about a time when you've worked with a difficult coworker and came to a resolution. People, when they answer hypothetical questions, tell me about how you would resolve a difficult situation with a coworker. You're kind of testing a different part of your brain, and like smart people will be able to answer what you want to hear. But a time when you've done this before is very different. You can say, well,
how would I do that? I would be awesome and amazing. How did I do that? Well, I didn't think, and I reacted too quickly, and I made a bad choice. And exactly. Yep.
And they'll tell you what they did, and then you have the ability to say like, oh, how do I feel about what they did? And you can, well, why did you tell your boss until they're talking to your coworker about that? You can ask that question, and then they can say, well, actually, I just really hate that guy. I can't talk to him at all. He's the worst. I just wanted him to get fired. It's like, okay, that's
got it.
I'm glad I understand that situation. Thank you for explaining it to me. And maybe that's what you want. Maybe that's what you don't want. But you have some data they can use to make decisions. So like consistent questions, tilting towards behavioral rather than hypothetical, and then beginning with the end in mind. So like the best companies, they will start by making the onboarding plan. Like what does success look like at 30, 60, 90 days? And what are some ways I can measure success? So typically it'll be something like, they're integrated with the team. It's like, okay, that's interesting. That sounds powerful. How would you know that someone's integrated with the team? And you might say, well, they're speaking up in most team meetings, or they're pushing back in a pull request on something that a more senior engineer does. They're like, okay, great. So those are concrete. We can measure them. Now we can think about how we would do those. And it also means, so you've built a better interview process. You've also built transparency with that new candidate. That new person starting, you say like, I want you integrated with the team, and how I'm gonna measure that is, are you speaking up in meetings? You just told that person that speaking up in meetings is valuable. They're more likely to do it. Right. So it's like you get victory from both sides. So that's like I think that's like the minimum viable interview process. Start with the end in mind, write down your questions, and like maybe don't use hypotheticals.
I love it. That was a fantastic diversion. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Full Stack PEO. Most founders start companies because they figured out a better way to solve a problem or serve a need, not because they love tracking payroll, filling out compliance forms, and explaining employee benefits packages. And yet, all that stuff still has to be done. That's why there's Full Stack PEO. Full Stack PEO specializes in turnkey HR for emerging companies, not just those core services, but advice and expertise that help founders maximize employee potential. Curious? Find out more at fullstackpeo.com.
All right, back to our regularly scheduled podcast. Right. This is where I would typically ask, when you think of competitors to Woven or competition for Woven, what comes to mind?
So competition is an interesting word, right? Because I think people have different frames when they ask it.
Yeah.
I kind of think of it, and I think there are three different answers for this one, right? So there's what investors mean when they ask you about this. And they're thinking, what are companies that like are similar to you, that sell the same product, that maybe have the same technology, and that maybe I might fund instead of you? And that's an important answer, and you need to have an answer to that. For us, there's we kind of divide the like developer screening market into generations. Like first generation is multiple choice tests. These things have been around forever. As soon as you had computers and the internet, people wanted to give people multiple choice tests.
Okay.
Developers won't take them because they suck. They feel like taking tests in school, and they're super arbitrary and they're not fun. So even if they were perfect and could tell you exactly who to hire, wouldn't matter.
And they're probably not as predictive because you're not actually doing the thing. Yep. Right. Got it.
Testing knowledge, which is part of the job, but that's not the job.
Right.
It's like, knowledge of dancing. It's like, what's a plie? I mean, if you know that, maybe you're more likely to be a better dancer.
A dancing metaphor is strong in you.
That's the one thing I know about that. I don't actually know what a plie is. So if I got that, I would put that. Maybe it works on me.
Right on.
Dance, I don't know what it is. And then talk about generation 2, which would be things where you're like writing code in a browser and it runs unit tests. Those are a good like low pass filter. And there's big companies. HackerRank is a good company that will help you speed up your interviewing process by screening out folks that were not going to be a good fit anyway, was going to waste their time, going to waste your time.
Okay.
There's lots of that generation 2 platforms like automated tests. The challenge there is you are then on the hook to evaluate that code because you probably care more than just can they pass automated tests. There's code structure, there's architecture.
Right.
There's a lot of like, they're tangible if you're an engineer, but they're not tangible through unit tests.
Right.
So we're a generation 3, for lack of a better term, platform. We're focused on those more quality metrics in your code. So we're going to evaluate your code for quality. Like, do you use a functional pattern, which is more indicative of seniority than maybe a non-functional pattern if you're using React? It's not wrong to not use that pattern, but it's better to use it. So we can aggregate those kind of signals. We can also evaluate written communication, like collaboration, like how you communicate to a colleague. An okay answer to help a junior colleague troubleshoot might be like restart the machine. Okay, I mean, that's something. A great answer would be check this log file for this string because of this reason, and here's a link to the docs. It's like teach someone to fish.
Right.
So we're focused on that analysis. So there are a couple companies that are like, they look like they're heading in that direction, and I think there will be a lot more because machine learning makes this possible. Previously, you would have to pay expert engineers to do all this. Now you can write classifiers for each one of these small yes/no questions, and it's very possible. So I think we'll see a lot of folks doing something similar to what we're doing pop up. So that's my investor competition answer.
Investor competition. That's great. Great answer, by the way. All right. Number two.
So I think this is like the jobs to be done lens, I think, is the most important lens here. So it's, what does your customer see when they're trying to make progress in their lives? What might they reach for? So there for us, it's, headhunters, like recruiters. Okay. Oh man, I had this open for 60 days. I really need this person. I got no candidate flow. All right. I'll answer one of the 15 recruiter emails I got yesterday.
Right.
And just see what they got. So they definitely reach for recruiters. They can also reach for some of those like generation 1 or generation 2 screening platforms. They might also reach for I'm going to spend some of my time outbound on LinkedIn. I'll go to meetups. I will downgrade my senior hire to a junior hire and just kind of make do. I will wait. I will go to, I think I already said go to meetups. These are some of the things that you do. Mm-hmm. I might also buy a Pluralsight subscription to say well, I've got a mid-level developer that doesn't know React. I need React. Maybe we'll just wait 3 months and let them train out. So I think that's the lens I try to keep myself in, because I think that's the customer lens of what might they look for is the one that matters. And what I find is the most important progress people need is they need enough candidates that are quality that they feel like they have choices to make a good decision in their hiring. That's kind of the true north is I need enough quality candidates to make a decision that I'm confident in.
Okay. And then number three,
this is the one the kind of internal rah-rah competition. This is you hate this other company or hate this other idea. I think an idea is better than a company. And for us, I think the world is moving. There's clearly credentialed based hiring is dumb. We all kind of agree that where you went to school is, there's some signal there, but there are so many great people that didn't go to these, elite institutions. Their life was different. They didn't have the traditional path, but they're awesome. And I love collecting these stories. Like one of my favorite is long haul trucker taught himself computer science, reading textbooks while driving, and is now one of the best algorithms database persons at this like huge venture backed startup I talked to. And like they got the job by having like a cousin that knew the marketing person that got him an interview, and they're like, oh my gosh, and the resume sucks. So there's going to be a future we're going to figure out how to hire without this credential and all these fuzzy signals.
Not if LinkedIn has their way.
Yeah. So I think there's a future version of the world, which is we get like AI that crawls like our social profiles and like our friends' profiles and like aggregates these signals and says like, your job score is 97. And it's just a faster, better version of this credentials discrimination world. And we're already seeing that. There's like stories of Amazon getting someone leaked that they tried this project where they like trained a machine learning model on the resumes. And it was like, it penalized women's as a word in front of a college. So any college that had women's in it was penalized in the resume score. There's another company that did the same thing. It trained this model, and the company rightly said, "Can we inspect your model?" And they found that the two biggest positive signals in favor of bringing a candidate in were the name Jared and whether or not they played high school lacrosse. Right. So,
what were do you have any idea what the jobs were that they were hiring for?
I'm not sure what the jobs were.
But it doesn't matter.
Yeah, they were training on their existing data. Like we're in a biased world. Like we have lots of stuff that no one designed that creates this bias and these bad decisions.
Yeah.
And all of this stuff. And it's much easier to just throw a machine learning model at the data you have and create something that's faster and cheaper and just as wrong. So for us, that's the world we're fighting against, is this like weak signals about a person to judge them versus like, what if we could give everyone a chance to learn and do the job and show what they can do? Like give people a chance, regardless of where they came from or whether they don't look like the right candidate. So for us, that credentialed, naive machine learning world, that's our enemy. That's the competition.
How often do you guys talk about that, or where does that come up internally?
So every time there's a lot of rants in Slack, right? So anytime we see an article like that, we'll post it. Those guys.
With the three of you, I can't possibly imagine that.
I love our Slack. Like Kyle and Nazo on Slack and talking about ideas and arguing about stuff. It's like, that is one of my great pleasures in life.
That's awesome. A quick aside, you ever read The Hard Thing About Hard Things?
Yeah.
Ben Horowitz? You're very much some of the ideas that you're evoking for me are what he's talking about with wartime CEO, peacetime CEO, right? Define the enemy, make it clear. It's fantastic. It's good stuff. All right. So when you think about sales, I'll maybe draw some inferences from your answer there. So when you think about sales, you're thinking about jobs to be done, right? So when you're going in and talking to somebody, it sounds like you're already starting there and having that conversation. So then do you ever find yourself trying to position against a Gen 1, Gen 2 solution in that space? And when you do that, how do you do that?
So it's mostly so it drives me a little bit nuts when I hear founders, especially founders that might be involved in sales, talk about how they don't really pay attention to the competition. So I feel like I need to pay attention to the competition because I need to be like the best possible buyer of the thing, a buyer to solve the problem that I care about solving. So I need to know what these other solutions are good at. And like some of our competitors are good at certain things. And like, if that's the problem they have, I need to be able to recommend it and say like, yeah, you actually just have a speed problem. You got tons of candidates through a second generation platform, and it seems like you'll do pretty well. So for me, it's about really diving in and saying, okay, how many candidates do you have? What's your hit rate on this interview process to the next process, and kind of modeling their hiring funnel, saying like, where are you spending the most time? How many mishires have you had in the last year? And if like they haven't had any mishires, their candidate volume is like not too high, but not too low, and they're using something like HackerRank, they'll say, yeah, keep using that. Sounds like it's good results. I ask about, my favorite question is the magic wand question. It's like, once I get a little context, I'll ask, okay, so you did this awesome thing you just told me about to make your process better, like with all the stuff that's going well, because usually people are like working hard at this problem. It's important. They're trying, they're spending like blood, sweat, and tears. All the stuff that's going well. Let's say you had a magic wand and you could wave and you can give yourself a new capability, like something that doesn't have to be possible. Like where would you wave that wand? And usually they'll wave it in one of a few places. And then I'll talk about that thing. I want to talk about what they care about. And if I have a position that I think we can help with, we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about, I'm a product person, so I love to talk about the minutia of a product. And last year I've been trying to learn how to do sales, which is mostly sales as follow up. And it's talk about what the other person cares about, not what you care about. And like,
yeah.
And it's hard to do. It's like easy to say that and it's hard to do. And I'm still bad at it sometimes. But the position is like, help them articulate the problem and then figure out if you can help with that problem, not the other things that you think you're good at and better at and all that stuff.
Right. When you think about where the market is going, and if you had to predict what a Generation 4 product in this market looks like, what do you think that is?
Airbnb has this like, what's, the 7-star experience or the 8-star experience.
Right. Yeah.
Really
that's a great, I'll have to start using that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, what is this like, even like the 10X, and their thing is like, someone, your favorite movie star picks you up from the airport and takes you to so I like that exercise. I think like maybe it's not possible what it would look like. And for us, for me at least, is kind of like the matrix, right? So you go to a job and you get plugged into this matrix and you do the job. And then you have like the I know Kung Fu person that teaches you how to do the job that you like, your skill, you have these skills are all there, but you're lacking this Kung Fu skill.
Right.
We're going to teach you Kung Fu. Like that's my magic wand version is you're actually doing the thing in a realistic environment, even more realistic. Maybe you're interacting with bots, things that kind of simulate the human element at least a little bit. And the magic is here's your gap and we'll help you plug that gap. I think that would be amazing. I think that's like a whole other product and that's a whole other crazy thing. But
I like it. So that answer sparked something for me that I probably should have caught earlier, which is your feedback to me as a hiring manager. When I get your report on a candidate, is it all technical focused? Is some of the stuff in there cultural? Like, because I think it is cultural, right? You're getting into like, would they be a good team player? Would they be like, because you're seeing how they interact on Slack and stuff like that, right? Is that a true statement? Some of that is indicators of cultural fit. Is that true?
I think it depends on what your culture is, whether we're giving you evidence that is sometimes based on someone's collaboration style and tendencies. So one of our customers is Lessonly, and they care a lot about empathetic communication. So that's something that's like one of their first tier concerns. So for them, there's a knob about how does someone communicate to that junior colleague? How do they address them? How do they set expectations? Do they thank them for their time? So for them, that knob was turned all the way up. And for them, that's a cultural thing. For other person, that's just like, that's a skill that I maybe want more or less. With culture, it's so hard. Like you ask 10 different people, you get 10 different definitions of culture, even at the same company.
Yeah.
Everyone knows it's important. Very few people know how to define it. I was excited at one point about like, we could use this to help with culture. And I kind of ran into the problem of if nobody can define it, how can I measure against it and improve it? So we're going to give you evidence about problem solving and collaboration and programming ability and system design. We're not going to give you like, high conscientiousness or personality or can't think of any other cultural values, but we're not going to give you direct cultural stuff, but we'll give you stuff that might play into your particular culture.
Interesting. So fast forward 5 years, do you think you're starting to play in that space at all? Or do you think it's just more on the technical side, broader, deeper, faster? Like, what do you think that looks like?
I think there's enough in collaboration, problem solving, and software engineering skills. And I think we'll move a little bit beyond software engineering. So I think there's adjacent areas like this technique of watch dancers dance. At my last company, I did this for digital marketing hiring. We did a little bit for sales hiring, did it for customer success hiring. And like it works. Like we hired Kate, our customer success lead. One of our big pieces was we had an inbox exercise where she spent an hour. We had some instructions. It's like a little bit of mini training. Like this is how you handle your inbox. Here's some of the tasks that you do in this job. And she did those tasks and she was awesome at it. And that made me very confident that she was the right person in the job. This general framework is really powerful. And I think we'll there's focus is important in the startups. We're staying focused now, but I'm excited about other roles and chances to work there. But I don't know if that's a 5-year, I don't know if that's a 10-year. That part is really fuzzy. I think that's where we're going, maybe less so than culture. Unless in the next 5 years, if I have some insight about how to actually measure culture and help people define it, that would be pretty exciting. But I don't have those right now.
Got it. 5 years out. In the short term, as you look at the next, you're just closing a round of funding, as you look at the next 6 to 12 months, what does that look like for Woven? What are you guys trying to get done in the short run?
So for us, I kind of think in terms of milestones. So right now, the biggest, we are default dead. Like the Polygram terminology of startup is either default alive or default dead. Like if you don't raise money again, will you die? And right now we have to raise money again. There's no reasonable path for us to not be dead. So we're focused on getting to that next milestone, which helps us raise money. And that'll get us to the point where we can get to cash flow positive or raise the next round. So like true north for us is we are going to fail at our mission if we die as a company. So let's get to the next milestone. So for that, it's 150K ARR, really good growth rate, 20% month on month, a good sales pipeline to sustain that. So that's our next 6 to 9 months is get to those metrics that venture capitalists look for in kind of a Series seed round and get there while building all of the other stuff you need so that we can keep growing that 20% month on month rate. Because it's super hard. It's like life comes at you fast when you're growing. That's a little bit of cliche, but we had something in June where I think it was June, maybe it was July, where Kyle was just getting like really busy with some of this work he was doing to help score and make recommendations for exercise. And he's like, man, we had kind of a bump in June and I was really busy. And we're like, man, yeah, Kyle, that sucks. And then we didn't do anything about it. So then September comes and everything has roughly every 3 months, things double at 20% month on month. Okay. So then that thing that was annoying in June is now like his whole life and he can't do anything else. And what we now realize is we should have done something in June. Right. And we're going to try to get ahead of that next time. But I think we're going to have to learn that lesson again and again. So get to the next milestone and try to like look around those corners so that those things that grow fast aren't going to like cause the wheels to fall off.
Right. Dude, it's awesome. I really appreciate the time. This was a great conversation. If people want to get a hold of you or if they want to learn more about Woven, where can they do that?
So Twitter is probably the best place to get a hold of me. And then from there, you can get to our website, which is woventeams.com.
Where can I find you on Twitter?
Wes Winham is my Twitter handle, at Wes Winham. And
awesome.
It's WESWINHAM.
Thanks so much, Wes.
Thank you, Mike.
If you're thinking of launching a SaaS product, Startup Competitors can provide data on your closest competitors, survey potential users, or provide other product validation services. Learn more at startupcompetitors.com.